Hey guys, today we're stepping into a world where adventure posters promised glory, but the reality was far closer to a steel coffin than a hero's stage. Imagine being a young man in 1940s Germany, barely out of school, staring up at the billboards that show handsome sailors smiling on the deck of submarines, blue ocean stretching behind them, medals glinting on crisp uniforms. The posters promised honor, travel, a chance to be elite. But here's the reality check. Most men who walked into that recruitment office wouldn't survive their first year under the sea. You probably wouldn't survive this either. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in line at the recruitment station. The air smells faintly of wet wool coats, ink, and floor polish. Around you are boys your age, some younger, one or two older. They shuffle forward with the same stiff unease, papers clutched in hand, each of you caught up in the same current. There's no real choice anymore. Posters painted you as adventurers. Your family spoke of duty. And the Reich whispered that submarines were the tip of the spear. But no one explained what that really meant. The medical inspection is brisk, mechanical. Stripped to the waist, you're prodded, peered at, and ordered to open your mouth under harsh lights. A doctor checks your teeth, ears, lungs, barely looking at you, only at the clipboard. The standards are laughably low. If you can stand upright without coughing blood, congratulations, you're submarine material. Swimming skills aren't even asked about. Swimming would only delay your death, not prevent it. You move on to paperwork, reams of forms filled with acronyms you don't understand, waivers you don't dare read. You sign because everyone else signs. A clerk stamps your papers with a thump that echoes louder than it should, sealing your fate with ink and indifference. Around you, boys mutter half-jokes. One says U-boat men are elite, the best of the best. No one laughs. You notice already that the word elite is code for something else, expendable, isolated, doomed. Outside the station, the world still looks normal. Cafes, trams, mothers with children. Yet, the moment your papers are stamped, you've stepped into a different world entirely. Your name has become a number on a roster. Your body, a piece of machinery the Reich intends to sink into the sea. The posters never said that. Training begins almost immediately. It's not the kind of training that builds confidence. It's more like a rehearsal for dying. The days are long, the lectures endless, delivered by men with twitching eyes who've already lost too many friends to the deep. You memorize diagrams of the submarine's anatomy, practice drills until your fingers blister, and repeat procedures designed less to save you than to make sure the boat lasts a few minutes longer in catastrophe. Instructors tell you this is preparation. They don't say preparation for what. The first time you see a decommissioned submarine used for drills, it smells of mildew, stale soup, and quiet failure. You crawl through its tubes blindfolded, upside down, water flooding your boots, heart hammering like a trapped bird. This is what you've signed for, not heroism, but survival in impossible conditions. And yet, there's still a strange pride. When you write home, You don't describe the mildew or the drills that feel like drowning. You talk about comradeship, about serving something greater. Your mother reads the letter at the kitchen table, eyes shining. She doesn't see the truth you already suspect, that she may never see you again. At night, lying on a thin mattress in a barracks that reeks of sweat and damp plaster, you hear muffled sobs. Some boys cry quietly, faces buried in their sleeves. Others whisper prayers, though not too loudly, because faith feels fragile down here. A few joke about medals they'll wear, the girls they'll impress, but the laughter dies fast. You all know the numbers, even if no one says them aloud. Most of you won't be coming back. What the propaganda couldn't capture was this: how easily a life can be stripped down to a serial number, a body shoved into a steel tube, and a future narrowed to a statistical chance. And yet, you keep walking forward, not because you're brave, not because you're reckless, but because the current of history is stronger than you. In the morning, another drill begins. This time, the instructors toss you into a water tank with a bulky rubber escape suit, forcing you to claw your way up against crushing resistance. You choke on salt water, lungs screaming, ears burning with pressure. When you break the surface, gasping, no one cheers. This isn't triumph. It's a reminder. Drowning is always waiting. But still, you train. Still, you march. Still, you convince yourself there must be a reason for this misery. After all, why else would the Reich pour so much into these floating coffins, if not for victory? Somewhere in the distance, the Atlantic roars. It is already hungry, and soon enough, it will be calling you by name. The days start before dawn. A whistle shrieks through the barracks, pulling you from the thin, bitter sleep that never feels long enough. Your body aches as though you've been beaten with sticks, though the truth is worse. You've simply been drilled to exhaustion. You pull on a uniform that already smells like mildew and stale sweat, because laundry is a luxury reserved for people who don't belong to the sea. Then you run, because that's all you ever do now. Run, march, crawl, repeat. They call it training, but the word feels dishonest. Training suggests preparation, the building of strength. What you're undergoing feels closer to sanding down the human spirit until only obedience remains. Instructors bark commands with voices so harsh they sound torn at the edges. They don't just tell you what to do, they watch you fail again and again, until failure feels like your natural state. That's intentional. If you stop believing in your own survival, you'll stop resisting the boat when it starts to kill you. Mornings are reserved for theory. You sit in cramped classrooms with walls damp from sea air, staring at diagrams pinned under glass, ballast tanks, pressure valves, periscope optics, torpedo tubes. The drawings are neat and clean, but you know the real thing won't be. An instructor traces a line with a stick, tapping the air tank schematic like he's knocking on a coffin lid. His eyes don't meet yours. They're glassy, distracted, like someone staring into a memory he can't escape. Later, you'll learn he's a veteran of 5 patrols. Survived, yes, but the word survivor means little here. He left pieces of himself on the ocean floor. You copy notes you barely understand. There are acronyms everywhere, mechanical terms that sound like riddles. At first, you try to memorize them, afraid of being singled out. But soon you realize no one remembers everything. You're not being trained to be an expert. You're being trained to react automatically, to act without thinking, because when panic floods the body, thought is a luxury. After lunch, the only meal that resembles food, though even that reeks faintly of grease, you move to the practical side. The instructors herd you into a mock-up submarine, a gutted shell bolted to the dock. It smells of diesel fuel and old leather, with an undertone of damp wood that never quite dries. Here you rehearse disaster, one nightmare after another. Flooding drill. Water bursts through the floor grates, icy and shocking. You scramble to seal bulkheads, the steel clanging under your hands. Your uniform soaked and clinging like a second skin. The instructors scream over the chaos, and in that moment you understand. It isn't a game. The boat will flood. It will catch fire. It will betray you. Your job isn't to prevent catastrophe. It's to delay the inevitable long enough to matter. Fire drill. Thick smoke pours from a hidden machine, blinding and choking. You crawl on hands and knees, eyes streaming, lungs searing. Someone vomits from the fumes, but the instructors don't care. You keep moving until your throat feels lined with ash. Escape drill. They strap a rubber suit onto you, stiff and reeking of rubber, and shove you into a water tank. The pressure squeezes your chest, your ears ring, and for a moment you're certain you're about to black out. You kick and claw upward, desperate for air. When you finally breach the surface, gasping, you don't feel triumphant. You feel cheated, because you know next time you might not make it. By evening, your muscles tremble from strain. You sit on the edge of a cot, trying to remember the last time you weren't tired. The barracks are thick with the smell of wet wool and mildew, and the coughing of boys whose lungs are already giving out. Some mutter about food. Others stare silently at the ceiling. You notice one boy carving a mark into the wooden bed frame, another tally of survival. Every once in a while, a morale officer visits. His uniform gleams. His smile is perfect, his words rehearsed. He speaks of honor, of protecting the fatherland, of how proud your families must be. He doesn't mention statistics. He doesn't mention the survival rate. He leaves after 10 minutes, his polished boots echoing on dry land, while you return to your wet clothes and the sound of someone quietly crying into a blanket. What gnaws at you most isn't the exhaustion or the drills. It's the creeping realization that this is only the beginning. If training feels like drowning, what will the ocean itself feel like? The instructors don't answer. They just order another set of drills, another round of punishment. By the end of the week, you've stopped dreaming of medals. You dream only of air. And yet, you keep going. Because the train is waiting, the sea is waiting, the U-boat is waiting. The Reich doesn't care whether you're ready. You will go below, because history has decided you will. And you already know, deep in the pit of your stomach, that the person who walks onto that submarine won't be the same as the one standing here in the drizzle, trying to convince himself he's not afraid. The first time the instructors tell you it's just a simulation, you almost believe them. But then the water starts rushing in, cold and merciless, and you understand that nothing about this is pretend. The purpose isn't to reassure you. It's to carve the word inevitable into your bones. Disaster isn't a possibility aboard a U-boat. It's a schedule. You just don't know the date yet. You're shoved into the mock-up submarine again, and the hatch slams shut behind you with a metallic finality that rattles the ribs. The space is too small for the number of men crammed inside, each of you pressed shoulder to shoulder, faces pale under flickering bulbs. The air already feels heavy, even before the drill begins. Then the instructor yanks a lever, and the pipes groan. A moment later, water bursts from the floor vents, flooding your boots in seconds. It's icy, shocking, a living thing determined to drag you down. "Seal it!" someone shouts. You grab at the wheel of the bulkhead, twisting until your palms burn, until the metal resists like a stubborn beast. The water keeps rising. Your heart hammers against your ribs. Somewhere in the chaos, someone panics, shrieking and clawing at the hatch, but the instructor blocks him with a single barked command. There's no escape. There's only the drill. And the unspoken lesson: if this were real, you'd already be dead. The fire drills are worse. Smoke pours from hidden machines, thick and acrid, filling your lungs with burning ash. You drop to your knees, eyes stinging, crawling blind through a choking fog. The heat presses against your skin, and the thought claws at the back of your mind. What if it isn't just smoke this time? What if it's fire licking at the engine room while you're buried alive, 200 meters down? You choke, you gag, but you keep crawling, hand pressed to the wall, searching for the valve that will make the smoke stop. When it finally does, you lie there heaving on the metal floor, the taste of ash sour on your tongue, sweat cold on your back. No one cheers, no one speaks, because every one of you knows that the boat doesn't care whether you found the valve in time. Then comes the escape tank. It looks almost harmless at first, a tall cylinder filled with water, glinting in the dim light. But the suit they hand you is stiff, reeking of rubber and grease, the seams pinching at your skin. You climb in because you're ordered to, because everyone else has. The water closes over your head, squeezing your chest, pushing against your ears, until pain blossoms inside your skull. The rubber hood fogs with each ragged breath, and for a moment you can't tell which way is up. You kick, desperate, clawing upward, every second stretching into eternity. The surface feels impossibly far, like swimming through tar. By the time you burst into the open air, you're gasping so hard it feels like your lungs might tear. The instructors mark something on a clipboard. You're alive for now. That's all that matters to them. Later, you hear stories whispered in the barracks. Recruits who drowned during training, their bodies pulled limp from the tanks while instructors muttered about weak stock. No official mention, no names written on the wall. Just a sudden, empty bunk and the silent agreement that no one will speak of it. The drills don't stop. If anything, they get harder, more punishing, as if the instructors are trying to wring out the last drop of resistance inside you. Some nights, lying on your thin mattress, you imagine the boat itself laughing at you, a long steel tube waiting in the harbor, knowing full well it will devour you when the time comes. The drills aren't about making you stronger. They're about teaching you to stop fighting, to accept, to obey. And yet, there are small moments of defiance. A joke whispered in the smoke, a hand clasped on the bulkhead wheel, a boy muttering that at least the water is clean compared to the soup. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because laughter feels like breathing for the first time in days. Still, the cracks show. One recruit freezes during a flooding drill, eyes wide, hands shaking so violently he can't turn the wheel. The instructor yanks him aside and barks at another to take over. Later, the boy is gone. No explanation, just silence. Maybe he was reassigned, maybe dismissed, maybe something else entirely. You don't ask. Questions don't live long here. The truth settles in slowly, like damp creeping through plaster. These simulations aren't designed to teach survival. They're rehearsals for death. You're being conditioned not to win, but to endure just long enough for the boat to complete its mission. The rest, the screams, the smoke, the water filling your lungs, are incidental. And as you lie awake that night, the air thick with mildew and whispered prayers, you realize something chilling. The sea hasn't even touched you yet. Everything you've endured so far has been practice. The real thing is still waiting, vast and black, eager to show you just how much a human body can suffer before it breaks. It sneaks up on you, not during the drills, not when the water claws at your boots or the smoke burns your lungs, but in the quiet moments between. Brotherhood. You don't call it that yet, but it's there, buried beneath exhaustion and fear. At night, the barracks hums with uneasy silence. Rows of bunks stacked close enough for one man's snores to rattle through another man's dreams. The air is sour with damp uniforms and the faint mildew that creeps up the walls like a living thing. You lie awake, staring at a ceiling that seems too close, listening to the rhythms of strangers breathing. That's when you first realize you're not alone in this. Not really. One boy, 2 bunks over, whispers a joke, something about the cook's stew tasting like it's been strained through his boots. It isn't funny, not really, but someone snorts. Then another chuckles. The laughter rolls through the dark like a ripple in still water. For a moment, the barracks feels less like a morgue and more like a dormitory. For a moment, you remember what it was like to be young, but the silence always returns. And when it does, it drags fear with it. The kind of fear no amount of laughter can erase. You see it in their eyes during the day, the way a boy's hand trembles when tightening a valve, the way another stares too long at the diagrams, as though they might rearrange themselves into escape routes. Some speak too quickly, too loudly, trying to convince themselves they're brave. Others say nothing at all, their silence louder than any joke. The veterans who visit don't help. Men with twitching eyelids and scars that look too fresh for the stories they tell. They sit on the edge of the barracks cot, staring into some invisible horizon, speaking in clipped phrases. We almost didn't make it. Depth charges like thunder. They never finish the stories. They just stop mid-sentence, eyes fixed on a wall that doesn't move. You wonder if they can still hear the sea in their sleep. One evening, an instructor orders you into the yard for a night march. The air is damp, heavy with salt from the coast, and the moonlight paints everything in silver. You trudge in silence, boots squelching in mud, shoulders brushing against the men beside you. No one talks, no one dares. The world feels like it's holding its breath. You glance sideways and catch the eye of a boy no older than 16. His lips move silently. A prayer. Maybe. Or a goodbye to someone far away. You don't ask, you just keep marching. By the second week, you start to recognize patterns. Some boys break fast, shaking, sobbing, begging to go home. They vanish overnight, their bunks stripped bare by morning. Others grow hard, brittle, jokes turning sharp, eyes narrowing whenever an instructor passes. You learn quickly not to trust the brittle ones. They're the ones who crack the loudest when the pressure comes. And then there are the quiet ones. The ones who endure. They don't laugh, don't cry, don't flinch when the water rises in the mock-up or the smoke blinds them. They simply do what's required. You start to watch them closely, trying to learn how to swallow fear without choking. Fear becomes a second skin. It clings tighter with every drill, every shouted order, every muffled sob at night. You try to ignore it, but it's there, whispering in the back of your mind. Most of you won't come back. You know the numbers. Everyone does. You don't speak them aloud, but they hang in the air, heavier than the mildew, thicker than the smoke. And yet, amidst the fear, the cracks, the dread, brotherhood grows. You see it when someone slips on the wet floor and another hand shoots out to steady him. You feel it when you cough during a smoke drill and a voice mutters, "Keep crawling, I've got you." You hear it when laughter bubbles up in the barracks, not because anything is funny, but because the alternative is silence. And silence is unbearable. It's strange how quickly strangers become family when the sea is already sharpening its teeth. You begin to memorize their faces, their voices, their small habits. The boy who hums when he's nervous. The one who carves tallies into his bunk. The one who always saves half his bread, even though it's stale. You don't realize it yet, but you're preparing for grief. One night, as you drift toward sleep, someone starts singing. A low, shaky voice carrying an old folk song about rivers and fields. Another voice joins in, then another. Soon the barracks is filled with quiet harmony, imperfect and raw, echoing against the damp walls. You lie there listening, eyes closed, and for a moment the fear lifts. For a moment you forget you're training for death. For a moment you believe you might come back. But morning always comes. The whistle shrieks, the drills begin, and the sea reminds you of its patience. Brotherhood is a fragile shield, fear an ever-present tide. You cling to both, because without them, you'd already be lost. The train ride feels longer than it is. You sit pressed against the window, uniform stiff on your shoulders, duffel at your feet, watching the gray landscape blur past. Villages drift by in silence, barn roofs sagging, church steeples leaning, children waving at soldiers they'll never see again. Every clatter of the tracks beats like a countdown in your chest. You know what waits at the end of the line, and so does everyone else in the carriage. That's why no one talks. Not really. Just the occasional mutter, the scrape of boots, the nervous shuffle of boys trying to look older than they are. When the train finally hisses into the station, the air hits you first. Salt, oil, and iron. A mixture so strong, it coats your tongue. Beyond the platform lies the dockyard, a forest of cranes and masts swaying against a wet sky. Workers in overalls move like ants, faces streaked with soot, shouting over the grind of metal. You follow the line, duffel thumping against your leg, until you see it. Your boat. It doesn't look like a marvel of engineering, not like the posters, not like the speeches. It looks like a coffin stretched into a cylinder and dipped in grease. Rust freckles the hull despite its fresh paint, and condensation beads down the steel skin like sweat. It lists ever so slightly against the dock, as though even here, in shallow water, it wants to sink. The officers don't greet you. There's no brass band, no flags waving, no proud handshake to mark your first step into service. Just a petty officer with a clipboard, calling out names, ticking boxes, waving you forward like livestock. Your turn comes. You shoulder the duffel, step onto the gangplank slick with drizzle, and climb the narrow ladder down into the conning tower. The first breath inside the boat nearly drops you. The air is hot, wet, and stale all at once, thick with machine grease, unwashed bodies, mildew, and something you can't place, something sweet, rotten, almost chemical. The smell has a weight, like a damp sponge pressing into your face. You swallow hard, forcing it down because gagging here would mark you before you've even begun. The passage is barely wide enough for your shoulders. Pipes jut from the walls at odd angles. Gauges flicker with dials you don't yet understand, and wires snake overhead like vines in a jungle made of metal. You crouch instinctively to avoid smashing your head, but the pipes seem to move anyway, waiting for you to forget. The lighting is low, yellow bulbs flickering like tired eyes, casting every surface in shades of rust. The crew is already here. They don't greet you, not really. A few glance up from their tasks, stirring a pot, wiping a valve, scribbling numbers into a logbook. Their eyes are hollow, their faces thin, their hair plastered to their skulls. Some nod politely. One coughs into his sleeve. No one smiles. Smiling has no place down here. A petty officer shows you your bunk, or what passes for one. A narrow shelf of fabric and steel wedged between two torpedo racks, barely wide enough to lie flat, barely long enough to stretch. The mattress is thin, the blanket damp, the pillow smells like someone else's scalp. Your duffel slides beneath the bunk, where it will live under someone else's boots. You're told not to unpack. There's nowhere to put anything. This space isn't yours. It never will be. Every inch of the submarine is claimed by something: a valve, a gauge, a lever, a hook. Scribbled pencil notes mark the walls. Don't trust this valve. Watch your head. Pray harder. There are no decorations, no photographs, no signs of home, just machinery and warning. The galley is laughable. A stove, a stack of battered pans, a cupboard that rattles whenever the boat sways. It's one of the few warm places, which means you'll learn to love it, no matter what comes out of those pans. The tour ends abruptly. No questions, no reassurances. You're handed a duty roster and told to make yourself useful. That's the only rule that matters here. Be useful. If you're not, you're ballast. You slump onto the bunk, duffel still tucked beneath, and stare at the ceiling, only a foot from your nose. A single rusted bolt clings loosely overhead. You wonder how long it's been like that, whether it will hold, whether it matters. Somewhere in the boat, someone starts singing. Off-key, low, almost a hum. It doesn't sound hopeful. It sounds like something you hum while waiting for something worse. And that's when it hits you, heavier than the duffel at your feet. You live here now. You will eat here, sleep here, sweat here, piss here. You might die here. The sea doesn't care about honor or propaganda. It only cares about pressure and silence. And as the hatch clanks shut behind you, sealing off the daylight, you realize the ocean has already started to close its hand around you. It takes less than an hour for the novelty of your new home to vanish. At first, you try to take in the details, to convince yourself there's something fascinating about the tight corridors and endless pipes. But fascination fades quickly when fascination keeps smashing your forehead against low beams. Soon, you stop seeing details. You only feel them. Steel pressing against your back, damp cloth against your skin, the unyielding thud of bulkheads under your boots. Your bunk, if that word even applies, is shared. Hot bunking, they call it. 3 men to 2 beds, rotating in shifts. By the time you crawl into your place, the mattress is still warm from someone else's body, damp with their sweat, carrying the faint sourness of their breath. You tell yourself you'll get used to it, that it's only temporary, but deep down you know better. This is permanent. This is survival by rotation. There is no privacy here. Not when you undress, not when you eat, not even when you sleep. The man above you shifts in his bunk, and you feel it like a tremor in your own. His cough rattles down through the springs into your skull. His nightmares become your nightmares, whether you want them or not. Every sigh, every twitch, every muttered word bleeds into your sleep until you no longer know if the dreams are yours or borrowed. The officers' quarters are slightly better. Partitioned bunks, marginally thicker mattresses, an illusion of privacy. But even they cannot escape the smell. It seeps into everything. Diesel, mildew, grease, sweat, unwashed bodies, sour bread, mold. You breathe it, wear it, become it. After a few days, you stop noticing, not because it's gone, but because your brain gives up. The galley is a joke, a corner barely large enough for one man to stand in, a stove bolted to the floor, a cupboard that rattles like loose teeth. The cook is already sweating into the pans, shirtless, muttering under his breath as he stirs something gray and unidentifiable. The smell clings to the air, mixing with the grease and mildew until your stomach twists, but you know better than to complain. Complaining wastes energy, and energy is all you have left to trade. Every inch of the submarine feels alive, but not in a comforting way. The walls drip condensation, the floor plates shudder beneath your boots, pipes groan with every shift of the hull. Nothing is still, nothing is quiet. Even when the engines are silent, the boat hums with some unseen rhythm, metal shifting, water pressing, pressure reminding you it's there. You begin to think of the submarine as a beast, one that carries you only because it hasn't yet decided to crush you. There are rituals here. You learn them quickly. Fold your clothes in a certain order, boots tucked precisely beneath the bunk, possessions wedged into cracks to create the illusion of personal space. You eat with your knees drawn in, shoulders tight, elbows tucked, because there's never enough room. You breathe shallowly when passing another man in the corridor, both of you turning sideways, brushing shoulders, pretending you don't feel the closeness. These rituals keep the peace, but they never ease the claustrophobia. Sleep is the worst. You climb into the warm, damp bunk, pulling a blanket that smells of mildew over your body, and listen. The engines rumble in the distance, pipes hiss, Men snore and mutter, boots scrape against the metal floor. Someone's bare feet slap toward the toilet, the sound echoing through the narrow corridor. You close your eyes, but rest doesn't come. Not real rest, only a shallow half-sleep, fragile and light, easily shattered by the cough of a bunkmate or the clang of a valve. When you finally do drift off, the dreams are never kind. They're filled with water, always water, pressing in, rising up, swallowing everything. The first time you wake to the sound of an alarm, you nearly bolt upright and crack your skull on the bunk above. It's only a drill, but your heart doesn't know the difference. You scramble into position, body still heavy with sleep. Hands fumbling at valves you barely understand. The officers bark orders, voices sharp, and you obey without thinking. Later, lying back in the bunk, you realize the truth. This is the rhythm now. Panic, duty, exhaustion. Repeat. The crew barely talks. Words are precious here, wasted only on necessity. A nod replaces a greeting. A grunt replaces a question. When they do speak, it's often in half-sentences, fragments that trail off into silence. You learn to read expressions instead, tight jaws, furrowed brows, eyes that refuse to meet yours. Every man carries fear, and every man hides it differently. Some whistle under their breath. Others sharpen tools that don't need sharpening. A few stare at the wall until their eyes glaze. And you? You're learning the art of invisibility. Be useful. Don't complain. Don't take up more space than you're allowed. If you can't fix something, don't break it. If you can't lead, follow. If you can't speak, stay silent. The submarine doesn't care who you are, what you believed, what your mother whispered the night you left. Down here, you're only as valuable as the task you can perform. And the unspoken rule is simple. If you're not useful, you're already dead. One evening, after hours of drills, you collapse into your bunk and stare at the ceiling again. That rusted bolt is still there, trembling slightly with every shudder of the boat. You wonder if it will fall tonight, land squarely between your eyes, and save you from the slow suffocation you're learning to call life. You almost hope it does. Then you hear it again, singing. Low, off-key, drifting through the corridors like smoke. Not cheerful, not even sad. Just steady, as if someone is reminding himself that sound still exists. You close your eyes and let it wash over you, and for a fleeting moment, you almost believe you can endure this. Almost. Sleep is not a gift here. It's a negotiation. A commodity rationed as carefully as fuel or bread. On land, you once closed your eyes and let the night carry you away. Here, there is no night, only shifts, alarms, and the constant grinding heartbeat of the boat. You don't fall asleep because you're ready. You collapse because your body has reached its limit. Hot bunking makes sure of that. The mattress beneath you is never truly yours, always carrying the ghost of the man who lay there before. It's still warm when you slide into it, the blanket still damp with another man's sweat, the pillow carrying the sharp tang of his scalp. Sometimes the sheets are gritty with dried salt, or worse, breadcrumbs from a stolen meal. You stop asking questions. You stop caring. The space is too narrow to roll over comfortably. You lie stiff, shoulders brushing the cold wall, knees pressed straight, toes almost grazing the steel bulkhead. Above you, another man shifts, and every movement rattles down into your bones. He coughs in his sleep, and it feels like he's coughing directly into your skull. He grinds his teeth until the sound makes your skin crawl. You shove cloth into your ears, but even muffled, the noise seeps through. And then there are the dreams, the ones that jolt you awake, slick with sweat, heart pounding. Convinced water is already rising in the bunk. Sometimes you dream of drowning, salt water filling your lungs, blackness pressing against your ribs until you burst awake, clawing for air. Other times, you dream of silence, of waking in the submarine and finding every man gone, bunks empty, gauges frozen, the boat drifting alone through endless dark. Those dreams are worse. At least drowning ends. But the real horror isn't in dreams, it's in waking. Because sleep doesn't refresh you here. It only dulls the edge of exhaustion for a moment before the boat grinds it back down. You rise groggy, sweat-soaked, muscles stiff, already tired before you've begun. The cycle erodes you, 6 hours on, 6 hours off, though off rarely means rest. You might be scrubbing mildew, tightening bolts, or patching leaks instead of sleeping. Time becomes meaningless. Days dissolve into a blur of shifts, naps, alarms, drills. Men adapt in strange ways. Some collapse the instant they touch the bunk. Dead to the world, no matter the noise, the smell, the heat. Others toss and turn for hours, muttering into the darkness, unable to surrender control even in exhaustion. One crewman wakes screaming every few nights, shouting names no one recognizes. Another whispers numbers in his sleep, endless calculations only he understands. You pretend not to hear. Everyone does. Acknowledging it makes it real, and reality is unbearable enough already. The noise is constant, the low growl of the engines, the hiss of steam, the drip of condensation, the clang of boots against steel. Even when the engines shut off, the silence is worse, an unnatural void that makes your ears ring, your heart pound. You lie there waiting for the next sound, terrified that quiet means death. Your brain never rests. Even in sleep, you listen. The smells don't help. The air is thick with sweat, mildew, and the sour tang of unwashed bodies. The blankets are damp, the pillow musty. The mattress infused with the stink of dozens of men before you. Sometimes, lying there, you imagine you can taste the stench in your throat, thick and oily, coating your tongue. Eventually, your mind gives up the fight. You stop noticing, not because it's gone, but because it's everywhere. One night, you dream you're walking in sunlight again. Trees swaying, birds calling, the smell of earth rising with each step. You wake, smiling. And then you hear the wet cough of the man above you. The hiss of a valve, the steady drip of condensation into a tin cup. The dream collapses. Reality presses in again, heavy and suffocating. You realize you've forgotten the sound of leaves rustling, the way air feels when it moves freely. You wonder if you'll ever remember it again. Madness creeps in slowly, like mold. You see it in small cracks, a man sharpening the same knife every night, though it's already dull and bent. Another murmuring apologies to the torpedo rack as if it were listening. The cook sometimes talks to the sausages, muttering bargains under his breath. You laugh the first time you hear it, but the laughter dies quickly. Because you know one day it might be you whispering to a wall. You develop rituals to keep yourself sane, folding your uniform in the same order, counting heartbeats until sleep comes, staring at the same rust spot on the ceiling until it feels familiar enough to be a friend. Anything to anchor yourself against the chaos pressing from all sides. Without rituals, you drift, and drifting down here is the first step to breaking. There are no locks on the mind, no bulkheads to seal against fear. The boat strips you bare, night after night, until all that's left is exhaustion, paranoia, and the faint hope that you'll live long enough to see daylight again. You cling to that hope, even as you lie sweating in another man's warmth, staring at rust, praying the dreams will let you rest. And deep down, you know the truth. You don't sleep in a submarine. You only delay madness one exhausted breath at a time. There is one toilet, one for 50 men. It isn't hidden away in some private corner, no sanctuary of tiled walls or running water. It's wedged into a narrow metal closet barely big enough to close the door, though most men don't bother because the latch sticks and the hinges scream like a wounded animal. Privacy doesn't exist down here, not for sleeping, not for eating, and certainly not for relieving yourself. Officially, it's called the head. The word carries a sort of naval dignity, but the contraption itself is anything but dignified. A maze of valves, levers, and pressure seals, it requires a procedure so complicated it comes with its own training. You don't simply sit and flush. That would be too merciful. Instead, you twist one valve to release pressure, another to open the line to the sea, a third to equalize. Get the order wrong, and you will. The consequences are immediate and biblical. Waste backs up, or worse, seawater rushes in, flooding the compartment with brine and filth. The first time you use it, your hands tremble. Not from modesty. You lost that the moment you stepped aboard, but from fear of making a mistake. A petty officer leans over your shoulder, barking the sequence. Valve 1, lever 2, then the pump. You follow, sweat running down your back. Heart hammering as though you're disarming a bomb. When the system finally groans and clears, you nearly sag with relief. Then you realize this was the easy part. Next time, you'll be on your own. And then there's the smell. The toilet vents directly to the sea, which might sound practical, but the plumbing never fully empties. Waste lingers in the pipes, stewing in the warmth, until the entire compartment reeks of rot and ammonia. When the boat is submerged too deep, the pressure makes flushing impossible, and everything builds up in the holding tank. Hours, sometimes days, pass before the system can be cleared. By then, the odor has seeped into every corner of the boat, mixing with grease, sweat, and mildew into an atmosphere so foul it feels alive. Toilet paper is rationed, thin, gray squares that crumble in your hand. When supplies run out, as they often do, men improvise. Newspaper, rags, even the least offensive corner of an undershirt. You know when someone has resorted to this because their laundry seems to move of its own accord. No one jokes about it, not openly. The head is sacred in its misery, a shared curse no one dares mock too loudly. Sometimes the system fails completely. A valve jams, a gasket bursts, or the pump clogs. Then the sanitary bucket appears. A dented metal pail with a lid passed around in silence like a chalice of shame. Men squat awkwardly in corners, shielded by a towel if they're lucky, stared at if they're not. Disposal becomes a ritual of humiliation. The bucket carried up the ladder, the hatch cracked open, the contents dumped into the sea while everyone prays the lid holds. Sometimes it doesn't. There are smells that cling to you forever. Noise is another betrayal. The head is not soundproof. Every grunt, splash, and curse echoes down the corridor, bouncing off metal walls for all to hear. Privacy is maintained only by a collective agreement. Pretend you didn't hear. Pretend no one has bowels. Pretend you're still human. The worst part is the way you adapt. After a week, the stench no longer makes you gag. After 2, you stop flinching at the sounds. After 3, you catch yourself timing your visits to avoid the rush, memorizing the rhythms of your shipmate's digestion as though it were another shift on the duty roster. By the end of the month, you barely notice. That's the most frightening realization of all, that you've accepted this, that what would once have horrified you is now routine. One night, you're woken by cursing. A valve has been turned in the wrong order, and seawater gushes into the compartment, spraying across the floor. Mixing with everything that was supposed to go out, men scramble with rags and buckets, trying to stem the tide, while the unlucky culprit stands frozen, horror etched into his face. The smell is indescribable. It seeps into your clothes, your skin, your lungs. Days later, you still taste it when you swallow. Every man has a story about the head. A time it betrayed him. A time it splattered back with demonic fury. A time he barely made it through the procedure before an officer banged on the door demanding speed. These stories aren't told for humor. They're confessions, whispered like prayers, proof that humiliation is universal down here. By week 2, you no longer think of the toilet as a place of relief. It's a battlefield, a mechanical riddle that punishes mistakes with shame and stench. You approach it the way a soldier approaches a minefield, slowly, carefully, with a silent hope you'll come out intact. And when you finally climb back into your bunk, the stink clinging to your hair, you realize something chilling. The toilet hasn't broken your spirit. It's absorbed it. Another piece of you surrendered to the boat. Another reminder that you're no longer living like a man. You're existing like machinery. You don't eat because you're hungry anymore. You eat because it's your turn. Meals are not meals on a U-boat. They're obligations, scheduled pauses in the endless cycle of noise and damp. You queue in the corridor, tin pole mass in hand, waiting for the cook to scrape something steaming and suspicious into it. At first, when the patrol begins, the food isn't terrible. There's bread, dense but edible, loaves stacked in nets that hang from the ceiling. There are tins of meat, labels promising pork or beef, though the contents often resemble gray jelly with veins of tendon. There are even potatoes, piled in crates, and onions dangling like trophies. For the first few days, someone might even slice an apple. You savor it, bite by bite, not for the taste, but for the reminder that freshness exists somewhere in the world. But the sea is patient, and rot is faster than you'd think. The bread begins to sprout green freckles within a week. Potatoes swell grotesque white tendrils, reaching like pale worms in the dark. Onions turn soft, collapsing inward with a stench that rivals the head. And still, you eat them. Because bad potatoes are better than no potatoes. Because moldy bread, once scraped clean with a knife, is still bread. The tins last longer, but they come with their own curses. Some bulge at the seams, swollen with bacteria waiting to burst. The men joke about botulism the same way they joke about depth charges, grim humor, the only defense against inevitability. Once, the cook opened a can of sauerkraut and found a tooth floating inside. No one asked whether it belonged to a rat or a factory worker. They just ate around it. Hunger makes philosophers of everyone. Coffee is rationed, though coffee is generous. It's ersatz, a bitter, burnt brew made from chicory or roasted barley. It scalds your tongue, tastes faintly of engine oil, but you drink it anyway because warmth is precious. Some men cradle the mugs long after they've drained them, inhaling the steam as though it's a memory of mornings that no longer exist. Sugar is rare. Real milk is a fairy tale. The galley itself is barely a corner, a stove bolted beside the engines, pans blackened and dented. The cook works shirtless, sweat dripping from his chest into every pot, muttering as he stirs. His arms shine with grease, his eyes dull from heat and repetition. You don't envy him. His job is the worst of all, feeding 50 men with rotting supplies in a kitchen the size of a coffin. He takes pride in small victories, bread not entirely moldy, soup without visible vermin. No one thanks him. Gratitude doesn't exist here. You eat where you can, sometimes crouched beneath a torpedo rack, sometimes cross-legged on the floor, sometimes leaning against a bulkhead while another man brushes past. There are no plates, no trays, just bowls and mugs passed around, wiped half clean with greasy rags before being filled again. If you drop something, you have 3 seconds to pick it up and decide whether it's still edible. The answer is always yes. Holidays pass unnoticed, except when someone digs out a special issue tin, usually older than the boat itself. Once, a tin of jam was opened to reveal a thick crust of mold. The crew ate it anyway, scraping the top layer aside with spoons. Another time, a tin of meat was so rancid it hissed when pierced. They still cooked it. By the time it hit your mouth, you no longer tasted disgust, only salt and grease. The digestive consequences are predictable. Gas builds in the cramped corridors. Silent but deadly until someone laughs, and then it isn't silent anymore. Stomachs cramp. Bowels rebel, the head becomes a battleground. Yet no one complains. Complaining doesn't change the menu, it only wastes breath. Over time, your body begins to change. Your belt notches tighten, your cheeks hollow. The skin takes on a grayish tint that never fades. You lose weight slowly, consistently until you stop recognizing yourself in the reflection of a steel panel. Food no longer satisfies. It only delays the gnawing emptiness. You chew because you must, swallow because the body demands it, and then wait for the next shift to begin. And still, there are moments of strange reverence. One night, someone finds a potato only half rotten. The cook slices it, fries the pieces in grease, and passes them around. Each man takes one, bites slowly, eyes closed, savoring the miracle. For a few shining seconds, it tastes like real food, like something from another life. You chew, swallow, and for the first time in weeks, you remember what it means to feel human. The memory of that potato will stay with you longer than any metal ever could, not because it was good, not because it filled you, but because for that brief, fleeting moment, the sea hadn't won. Time slips away from you here, not gently, not like sand through your fingers, but violently, like someone has cut the thread that once tied you to the world above. In the submarine, days don't exist. There is no sunrise, no sunset, no shift in shadows to mark the turning of hours. Only artificial light and the ticking of clocks that never seem to move. At first, you try to keep track. You count your shifts, mark meals, whisper numbers under your breath like prayers. 6 hours on, 6 hours off. Watch, eat, sleep, drill, repeat. But repetition erodes memory. After the third or fourth day submerged, you're no longer sure what day it is. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. It makes no difference. The boat doesn't care. The sea doesn't care. Time has dissolved. Your body revolts against the absence of rhythm. Without the sun, your sleep becomes cares ragged, fractured. Sometimes you wake convinced it's morning, only to find you've only been under a blanket for an hour. Other times, you collapse at your post, head nodding, and no amount of shouting can fully drag you back. The line between waking and dreaming blurs until you no longer trust either. The light inside the boat never changes. Dim yellow bulbs glare overhead, buzzing faintly, casting everything in sickly shades of rust and shadow. They say the bulbs will last the patrol, but you wonder. Already, some flicker, casting the passageways into epileptic stutters of light and dark. It makes the corridors feel haunted, like something is moving in the half-second between flickers. You blink too often. You see shapes that aren't there. You begin to crave light. Not just brightness, but real light, sunlight, warm and golden, that touches your skin and makes shadows dance. You close your eyes and try to remember the sensation, the way it prickles your arms, the way it burns. Your eyelids red, the way it warms you from the outside in. But the memory fades. Already you can't be sure if you're remembering sunlight or just imagining it. The officers don't help. They keep the schedule strict, the drills constant, the shifts grinding. A man once asked what day it was. The officer shrugged. The day the sea decides. That was the only answer. No one asked again. Some men create their own rituals. One carves notches into the bulkhead with a knife, one for every shift. Another whispers dates into the air before each sleep, clinging to the illusion of a calendar. A third writes letters he'll never send, each beginning with a date chosen at random. You read the letters over his shoulder once, and they made no sense, half memory, half delirium. But he folded them neatly, tucked them under his bunk as though one day he might deliver them. Without days, your mind begins to wander. You lose track not just of time, but of self. You forget your birthday. You forget your age. The mirror above the sink shows a face you don't recognize. Hollow cheeks, stubble sprouting in patches, eyes ringed with purple shadows. You run a hand down your jaw, but the stranger doesn't disappear. You've become someone else in the absence of sun. Someone the land will not recognize. There is no weather here, no rain, no wind, no sky. Only the endless pressure of the sea pressing against the hull. The world above could be burning, freezing, drowning, and you would never know. Once, you overheard two men whispering about whether the war had already ended. Maybe peace had been signed. Maybe everyone was celebrating in the streets. Maybe you were the only fools still down here, forgotten. No one laughed, because it might be true. When the boat finally surfaces for a few hours, the hatch is opened, and the air rushes in like a gift from God. You scramble up the ladder, desperate, face tilted skyward. But the sky is gray, flat, and cold. Clouds smother the sun. Waves slap against the hull, and the wind cuts like knives. Still, it's freedom. Still, it's air. You drink it in, lungs greedy, eyes watering, skin shivering. For those few moments, you remember what life is. And then the order comes to dive again, and the hatch clangs shut, and daylight vanishes like a dream you can't get back. After weeks without sun, madness grows. A man wakes screaming that he can see daylight streaming through the walls, though there's nothing but metal and rust. Another swears he heard birds singing in the engine room. You don't question them. You understand. Because sometimes, in the half-light of a flickering bulb, you think you see it too. A glow just out of reach, a sliver of sky that must surely be there if only you look harder. But when you blink, it's gone. And so you drift in this limbo. No days, no nights, only the endless hum of machinery and the weight of water above. You stop hoping for sunrise. You stop expecting change. You exist, suspended in time, waiting for a clock that no longer ticks. And the most terrifying part? You realize the boat has stolen not just your days, but your sense of them. When you finally return to the surface, if you return at all, you may never see the sun the same way again. The boat is alive. You know it now. Not in the way a man is alive, but in the way an animal breathes, shifts, and complains when burdened too heavily. At first, you thought the noises were random, a groan here, a pop there. The hiss of steam, the whine of metal under strain. But the longer you live inside its belly, the more you recognize a pattern. The submarine has moods. When you dive deep, past the point where your stomach tightens, the hull creaks like an old tree, bending in a storm. It's the sound of steel being crushed by tons of water pressing in from every direction. Every groan is a reminder that this boat is only barely holding the sea at bay. Sometimes, the sound is low and slow, like a sigh. Other times, it's a sharp crack that makes every man freeze, eyes darting upward as though they could see the rivets loosening. The pressure is constant. You can't feel it directly, but you know it's there, miles of ocean pressing down, eager to fill the empty lungs of the boat with blackness. The officers say the hull is rated for it, that the engineers tested it, that the steel will hold, but they never say it with conviction. And you can't help but notice how their knuckles whiten on the rails when the boat sinks deeper. Pipes rattle overhead, dripping condensation onto your neck. Bolts vibrate in their sockets. Valves hiss, releasing bursts of steam that fog your glasses and burn your skin. Sometimes the whole frame shudders as though struck by a giant hand. You ask what it was, and no one answers. They don't need to. Everyone knows. The sea is testing the seams. sleep doesn't shield you from it. Lying in your bunk, you feel the vibrations through the mattress, hear the boat's breathing in your ears. The groans creep into your dreams until you're no longer sure if you're dreaming of drowning or simply listening to the hull protest in the dark. One night, you wake to a sound like splitting wood and are certain this is the end. Men leap from their bunks, clutching at rails, eyes wide. But the boat holds. It always holds, for now. You begin to personify the submarine. Some men call it she, others call it beast, a few call it coffin. You don't give it a name out loud, but in your head you think of it as something ancient and stubborn, something that carries you only because it hasn't yet decided to crush you. Every groan feels like a warning. I can end you whenever I choose. Then there are the smells the boat exhales, sharp tangs of oil, sulfur, and ozone that drift through the corridors. A sudden whiff of burning insulation, and panic ripples through the crew. Is it just the generator? Or is fire about to break loose in this steel tomb? Men sniff the air like dogs, tense, waiting for the alarm. When none comes, they relax, but only slightly. They know the boat has moods, and sometimes those moods are deadly. During drills, you hear the boat at its angriest. Crash dives slam you against the bulkhead, the hull shuddering, valves shrieking as water rushes over the deck outside. Every man clutches something, bracing, waiting for the awful sound of metal failing. It never comes, but the silence afterward is worse. You realize you were holding your breath the whole time. You release it, trembling, and wonder how many times your lungs can endure this cycle before they give out. Even in calm waters, the boat never rests. It ticks, shifts, breathes, as though adjusting its spine. You begin to imagine it as a predator pacing its cage. The walls seem closer some days. The ceilings are lower, the corridors narrower. The boat is shrinking, squeezing you, testing how much flesh and spirit you can lose before you vanish. The veterans don't flinch at the noises anymore. They've heard worse, they say. A hull buckling so loud it felt like thunder, a valve exploding like cannon fire. They tell stories of boats that didn't groan, but screamed just before breaking apart. You wish they wouldn't share these tales, but you listen anyway, because silence is worse. Once, in the dead of night, you swear you hear something new, a low moan, almost human, rising from the stern. You freeze, heart racing, waiting for someone else to react, but no one stirs. Men snore in their bunks, boots clink against the floor, the engines throb. Only you seem to hear it. You press your ear to the wall, and the sound vibrates through your skull. Not a moan, but a warning, long and drawn out, like the boat whispering its displeasure. You don't tell anyone. Some secrets are too heavy to share, and yet, despite all this, you depend on the boat. You curse its groans, fear its sighs, but you also cling to them. Silence would mean death. The day the boat stops speaking is the day you drown. So you listen. Every rattle, every hiss, every crack becomes part of your language. You know when the engines are healthy, when the pumps are tired, when the hull is stretching too far. You know the voice of your prison, your guardian, your executioner. And deep inside, you begin to accept something terrible. The boat will outlive you. Whether it carries you home or drags you to the bottom, The steel will endure. You, however, are already crumbling. It begins with a sound you don't immediately recognize, sharp, clinical, almost polite. A ping, faint at first, like a drop of metal on glass. Then another, then a chain of them, crisp and regular, marching across the hull. Someone whispers a single word that sucks the air out of the boat. As-diahi. Sonar. They've found you, or they're close enough to try. The orders arrive in a voice so soft it feels like blasphemy to disobey. Silent running. The engines throttle down to a feline purr, then to a hush. Fans dim. Lights fall to a tired dusk. Boots lift higher. Every footstep a careful ballet. Conversation evaporates. Even breathing feels like a trespass. The boat's heartbeat slows until you can't tell where your pulse ends and the steel's begins. Depth 220, 240. The numbers slide past like inches on a ruler you wish you'd never learned to read. The hull complains, the long old bone groan you've come to know, while gauges twitch as if startled. You stare at a droplet forming under a seam, then at another, tiny crystalline hemispheres of ocean sweat that tremble but do not fall. Not yet. The pings sharpen, closer now, calculating, measuring you in yards and centimeters, in guesses and improvements. In your mind, you see a shape above, a lean destroyer. Knives for limbs, listening, circling, deciding if you're real. The captain stands with one hand on a rail, eyes on nothing you can see. He says, almost gently, "Prepare, bold." The decoy, a small canister that releases a cloud of bubbles to mimic a sub's breathing, waits by the hatch like a talisman. You taste metal. Everyone does, though no one mentions it. The radio man presses headphones tight enough to leave grooves, waiting for the chatter that will mean hunting has become killing. A petty officer rests his palm on a valve wheel like it's a shoulder that needs steadying. Beside you, a boy folds and refolds his cap so many times it loses its shape. From the galley comes the smallest of clinks, spoon to pan, and 50 heads turn as though a bomb has gone off. The cook freezes, the spoon goes still. The boat returns to breathless quiet. The first pattern falls too far away to be anything but a lesson. A distant thump, the sea thunking its chest like a gorilla you can't see. Sound arrives late under pressure. Thickened, softened, but you feel it in the soles of your feet. Then 5 more, stepped like a staircase into your gut. Dust misting out of light fixtures. A wrench shivering along the deck until a hand pins it. The captain's voice again. Hold course. You learn very quickly that depth charges are not explosions. They are interrogations. Somewhere above, men you'll never meet are dropping steel barrels packed with high explosive to ask the same question over and over. Are you here? Are you here? Are you here? Each answer is measured in shock waves. Each answer decides whether you continue breathing. The second pattern is closer. The boat jumps, not literally, but in the way your bones perceive it, a sudden flinch the steel can't admit. Your teeth click. Someone's elbow slams a bulkhead, and he swallows the yelp. A valve shrieks, a sound so wounded your eyes water. The air changes instantly to something gray and electrical. You can taste heated metal. You tell yourself it's imagination. You know it isn't. Release bold. The decoy goes with a twitch and a pop. Expelled into black water where it blooms into a false submarine, bubbles whispering, a phantom heart for the hunters to follow. You picture it unfurling behind you, a ghost of your shape, and wish you could trade places with it. Then the big one hits close enough to break categories. It doesn't boom. It arrives inside you. The boat bucks like an animal. A lamp glares and dies. Bolts scream. A burst pipe hisses scalding breath across your wrists. And you jerk back so hard your shoulder thuds metal. The deck tilts and rights, not capsize, but threat, as if practicing cruelty. Somewhere aft, a man vomits softly into his sleeve and keeps his station. You love him for that. Orders ripple, quiet and exact. Blow trim. Forward 2 degrees. Hold. Hold. Hands move, mouths stay shut. Your fingers find a wheel you don't remember learning and turn it a quarter. Waiting for the feel in the wrist that means enough. You cannot hear your breath. You can hear your pulse. You can count it. You do. The third and fourth patterns practice a different technique. Creeping, they call it later. The escort guesses your path and walks the charges along it in tidy rows, each column of water collapsing with a muffled, murderous poof. Between blasts, there is a special kind of silence, the silence of dice in air before they land. Men pray there, not loudly, not even with words, with eyelids, with clenched jaws, with the way they refuse to look at each other in case the mirror of another face shatters something vital. Something begins to drip in earnest now, not condensation, but the careful, accusing tap of a leak. The sound enters the room the way a stranger enters a funeral. Everyone hears it, but no one greets it first. Then the engineer moves, a low crab scuttle, and someone is already there with a rag, a clamp, a length of friction tape. It is not heroism. It is literacy, the boat's grammar and its spelling, corrected before the sentence runs. Above, the destroyer is guessing. The decoy sings. Your boat slides deeper. The chart whispers past the captain's finger like a charm you hope still works. Another set of charges. Farther, farther still. The pings restart, patient as a metronome. The hunters think they've fooled you by pausing, the way a cat pauses so the mouse will move. You do not move. The boat holds its breath until your lungs file a complaint with God. Time in a hunt loses unit. Seconds smear, minutes abrade, and somewhere in your back a small knot ties itself and promises never to loosen again. The smell of fear, which you once thought poetic, reveals itself as chemistry. Sour breaths, hot wool, a copper trace of blood from somewhere someone will not confess. The cook, saint of the stove, pushes a cup into your hand without looking. Water, clean as the word can be down here. You don't drink, you hold it. Warmth is the last religion, and you are orthodox again. The charges return one more time, not as a pattern, but as a tantrum. Too many, too fast, falling without geometry. A captain above losing patience. The boat reels, the lights stutter. For an instant everything vibrates into blur, and you think, this is the photo they'll never find. Then the sea resets, drags its sleeve over its own table, and the next blast does not come. Pings fade, the tiny world breathes. Fans tick up to timid. Someone's laugh erupts, the dry bark of a man whose control had been standing on a single leg. Another man starts crying without sound, tears collected neatly along the rim of his nose, to be wiped later when dignity returns from wherever it hid. The captain closes his eyes for 2 counts, opens them and says, "Check for damage." Damage is everywhere and nowhere. A hairline here, a weeping valve there, a gauge whose needle now lives 1 width left of where it used to. Nothing fatal today. Everything cumulative tomorrow. You pass wrenches, tape, string, your own shirt for a temporary gasket because you will ask it back later and it will never be clean again. The boat hums, insulted but willing. After, the quiet is worse than noise. Every pipe is suspicious. Every hiss is treason. You lean an ear to the steel and hear afar music, distant screws diminishing. The escort choosing to believe the lie you sold with bubbles. Somewhere in the dark dazzle of the surface, men you do not hate are peering into water that pretends to be simple and deciding they have better places to be. Only then do you notice your hands. They shake, not a lot, enough to make the surface of the water in your cup quilt itself. You sip. It tastes like aluminum and relief. You meet a pair of eyes across the passage, gray, bloodshot, familiar now, and you both nod, the kind of nod reserved for people who have been measured and not found wanting this time. Later, in your bunk, you do not sleep. You replay the hunt in the muscle memory of your fingers, in the high, ringing place behind your ears where the pings nested. You realize the worst part isn't that you almost died. It's that you learned how to live through it, which means you can live through it again, which means they can make you try. Somewhere between waking and whatever passes for dreaming down here, you imagine the destroyer's crew writing their own small reports, entering neat numbers and circles on a chart, satisfied that they've cleaned a lane for the convoy. You do not blame them. You are both doing arithmetic with the same ocean. Their math was off by 1 boat today. Tomorrow it evens out. It always does. When the next watch begins, the boat is already angling back toward the lane. Engines up, fans too honest. The air tasting faintly of warm dust as bulbs reassert their control of the dark. You return to your station, touch the valve you have learned like a pulse, and discover a new truth. Terror can be folded and stowed. It waits where you put it. It will be there when the pings return. And they will. The ocean is patient, the escorts persistent, the arithmetic unsentimental. You survived the question today. Tomorrow they will ask again. The first thing you notice is that the air has weight now. Not just thickness, not just humidity, but weight. Every breath drags, sticky as molasses, heavy with the ghosts of thousands of exhales. You inhale, and it tastes of other men. Sweat, fear, stale bread, oil, salt, smoke. You exhale and add your own contribution to the soup. Ventilation was never designed for comfort. It's meant to keep you alive, barely. The fans hum like tired bees, pushing air through ducts lined with condensation, but there is no freshness, no renewal. The oxygen scrubbers grind away, rattling as chemicals eat carbon dioxide, but they cannot eat the odors. Nothing eats the odors. They grow, they thicken, they settle into your clothes, your hair, your tongue. Soon you realize the stench isn't just in the air, it's in you. At first, you thought you could get used to it. Human noses adjust, dulling the sharpness of smells that linger too long. But down here, there is no dulling. The air keeps changing, evolving. Fermenting like a stew left too long on the stove. One day it's sour, another day metallic, another day sweet in a way that makes you gag. The combination is always different, always foul, always intrusive. And it's not just the air. The men themselves are part of it. You live so close, you can hear their stomachs churn, smell their skin ferment, taste their sighs. Privacy doesn't exist. A man sneezes and you feel the mist on your cheek. A man scratches his feet and the stink of rot fills your bunk. A man farts and it doesn't dissipate. It lingers, weaving into the fabric of your blanket until you're swaddled in it. Laundry is a fantasy. Clothes are worn until they stiffen with salt, until they shine with grease, until touching them feels like handling waxed canvas. Boots stink of mildew. Socks stiffen into weapons. Even skin rebels, itching, cracking, oozing. You smell yourself and realize you are no different. That you too are a walking contribution to the rot. Shame dies quickly in such company. Disgust follows. Then comes resignation. Food doesn't help. Cabbage, potatoes, onions, cheap, dense things that last in storage but reek in digestion. The galley pumps out its own perfume, frying fat, scorched beans, sour coffee that tastes of iron. For a moment, the smells are welcome, almost home-like, until they mingle with sweat and mildew and exhaust. Then it's just another note in the symphony of stench. The head, the toilet, is its own circle of hell. A single stall, small enough you can barely kneel. Pipes gurgle and wheeze. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the pressure builds wrong and waste backflows, flooding the compartment with what no man wants to name. You learn to piss quickly, silently, without touching more surfaces than necessary. You learn to breathe through your mouth. Sometimes you hold it until your kidneys ache rather than step inside. But there's no avoiding it. The head's scent leaks into the corridor, joins the general fog. When a flush goes wrong, the smell swallows half the boat. Men gag, retch, curse, but there is nowhere to escape. You keep working your station while your eyes water, because what else is there to do? Sleep offers no reprieve. In your bunk, pressed shoulder to shoulder, you lie inside the heat and musk of dozens of unwashed bodies. Blankets hold the scent of every man who used them before. The pillow smells of grease and hair and dreams you wish you didn't share. You bury your face anyway, because there is no alternative. Even in sleep, the smell climbs into your nostrils, tangling with your dreams until you wake tasting another man's sweat. After a while, the stench does something to you. It seeps deeper than your skin. You stop gagging. You stop noticing. You stop remembering what clean air felt like. Men who survive patrols say the worst shock is surfacing, not because of light or sound, but because of smell. They describe stepping out onto deck, inhaling and collapsing because the world is too fragrant. Flowers, grass, wood smoke, rain. Their lungs can't recognize it. They choke on what once was life. The officers say nothing about the smell. They pretend it doesn't exist as though acknowledging it would give it power. Orders continue. drills continue. Life continues. But you see it in their eyes, in the way they pinch their noses when they think no one is looking, in the way they turn their heads from their own collars. No rank is immune. The stench conquers all, and yet, sometimes, the stink becomes a bond. One night, after a drill leaves everyone drenched in sweat, laughter bursts out. Real laughter. Someone jokes that if the enemy ever boards, they'll retreat faster than the stink can chase them. Someone else swears you could bottle the air and use it as a weapon. Even the captain smiles, faintly. The laughter dies quickly, swallowed by exhaustion, but it proves something. The smell is not just filth. It is proof of endurance. Proof that you are still alive in a place designed to kill you. In the darkest hours, you realize the smell is more than odor. It is memory being written into your body. Years from now, you'll step into a basement, a factory, a crowded train car, and it will return. A ghost, a reminder. The stench of men trapped beneath the sea will haunt you longer than fear itself. You inhale again, feel the thickness coat your throat, and whisper the truth to yourself. This is the smell of survival. The submarine is not only steel and rivets, it is a body, and like any body, it must be fed. The crew needs bread and potatoes. The boat itself needs oil, diesel, grease, electricity. Every system inside it hungers. Every system demands constant attention. Engines are the loudest appetite. Twin diesels throb like iron lungs when you surface, rattling the whole frame until spoons in the galley dance on their hooks. They guzzle fuel by the gallon, spewing exhaust through pipes that cough and spit like angry smokers. Their vibrations seep into your chest, becoming a second heartbeat you cannot silence. When they stop, when the engines choke into silence, the absence is deafening, like your heart forgetting to beat. On the surface, you can vent the exhaust into the open sky. Below, it is different. You rely on the batteries, massive cells packed into the belly of the boat, each one heavy as a man, each one fragile as a child. They drink charge when the diesels are running, and when you dive, they repay you in silence. Silent running is only possible because the batteries surrender their stored breath. But their hunger is merciless. The longer you dive, the more they deplete, until every lamp dims, every gauge quivers. Every man starts counting minutes in his pulse, and when batteries starve, death arrives in silence too. No engines, no fans, no pumps, just stillness. Men speak of asphyxiation like drowning without water. You don't imagine it. You taste it in the air already, thick with carbon dioxide. That's when the scrubbers come alive, the soda-lime canisters. They hiss and exhale heat, chemical stomachs digesting what you exhale. But even they get tired. Their powder clumps, their trays clog, their appetite wanes. When that happens, every breath becomes heavier. A yawn feels like climbing a hill. The machinery whispers, "Feed me or suffocate." The pumps are another hunger, always thirsty. Seawater creeps in no matter how perfect the welds, sweating through rivets, dribbling through valves. Pumps gulp it back out in endless slurps. You learn their sound, the steady thrum that means survival, the sudden cough that means blockage, the silence that means you'd better start bailing by hand. A pump starved of power becomes a coffin maker. You touch their warm casings the way a farmer pats the flank of a horse, not out of affection, but out of dependence. Grease and oil are the boat's blood. Every lever, every hinge, every gear tooth begs for lubrication. Without it, they squeal, scream, and seize. So men crawl through cramped shafts with tins of grease, smearing black paste onto shining steel. Their coveralls glisten with it, hands permanently stained. The smell of oil becomes part of their skin. Sometimes you wonder if, when the war ends, they will bleed black instead of red. And then there is food for men, the other machinery. The galley runs on fumes, feeding dozens from a stove barely big enough for 2 pans. Rations grow monotonous. Bread hardens, potatoes sprout, onions rot. The stench of cabbage clings to every meal. Meat is a memory, fresh fruit a dream. Men joke about steak and ale, but their stomachs growl with hunger their mouths won't admit. You shovel food into your body not because it satisfies, but because it's fuel. You are machinery, too, and machinery cannot run on empty. The hunger of the boat doesn't stop with fuel and food. It craves maintenance. Endless maintenance. Bolts loosen, pipes crack, valves weep, gauges drift. Every hour, some small thing demands fixing. You become part mechanic, part priest, performing rituals to keep the god of steel appeased. Miss a ritual, and the boat punishes you. A valve bursts at depth, a gear slips during maneuver, a hinge shrieks during silent running. Every oversight is an accusation. The engines especially are jealous gods. They demand tuning, tightening, coaxing. They overheat, cough, spit flames. You stand watch over them with oily rags, listening for subtle shifts in rhythm. Too slow, and you lose speed. Too fast, and the pistons cook themselves to death. The engines never forgive. They either perform or destroy you. You notice how men adapt their bodies to the boat's appetite. They sweat and bleed into it. They scrape knuckles raw on sharp corners. They wear grease under their nails like badges. They stop flinching when hot water splashes their arms or sparks nip their fingers. The boat takes little bites of them each day, chewing slowly. And still, there's never enough. Never enough fuel to feel safe. Never enough charge to stay submerged forever. Never enough food to quiet the stomach. The machinery is always hungrier than you can satisfy. You come to understand that survival is not defeating hunger. It is learning to live beside it. Sometimes, when you're at your station, you feel the boat's hunger is not mechanical at all. It is alive. It feeds on your sweat, your fear, your faith. You imagine the steel drinking it in, growing stronger the more you weaken. The boat groans and sighs not because of the sea, but because it is digesting you. In rare, quiet moments, you press your hand to a bulkhead and feel the vibration under your palm, thrum of engines, pulse of pumps, wheeze of scrubbers. The submarine is a beast, always chewing. And you, along with everyone else, are both its caretakers and its fodder. You realize then the boat doesn't just carry you, it consumes you. Slowly, patiently, inevitably. Sleep on a submarine is not rest, it is surrender. You lie down in a bunk barely wider than your shoulders, stacked 3 high, pressed so close to the man above you that if he turns, your nose feels his blanket shift. The mattress is thin, the springs complain, and the pillow smells of whoever used it last patrol. There is no linen rotation, no crisp white sheets, only canvas darkened by sweat, oil, and the grease of countless scalps. You curl onto your side because lying flat is impossible. And you learn to tuck your elbows so they don't jab the bulkhead. The blanket itches. Your boots stay at the foot of the bunk, their stink rising to your face, but you no longer notice. The rhythm of the engines hums into your bones, a lullaby of vibration. You close your eyes, but darkness was already here. Dreams do not come gently. They are jagged things, splinters of waking life rearranged by exhaustion. You dream of water, always water. Sometimes you are swimming on a warm summer lake, sunlight turning ripples to diamonds. Sometimes you are drowning, lungs bursting as you claw upward toward a surface that keeps retreating. Sometimes you float above the boat itself, seeing it from outside, an insect crawling through endless black. Often your dreams borrow sounds, echoes from the boat. A creak in the hull becomes thunder in your sleep. A cough from the man below you turns into a gunshot. A depth charge from hours ago still detonates behind your eyelids. You wake gasping, heart hammering, unsure if the blast was memory or present. The worst are the half-dreams, that place between waking and sleep where your mind plays tricks. You hear voices whispering your name, but no one is there. You see faces of those you left behind, mother, sweetheart, child, shimmering in the dim light, then fading when you blink. You feel water dripping on your face, though the ceiling is dry. In those moments, madness feels close, perched on the edge of your bunk, watching. There are no clocks in your dreams. Watches rotate, shifts change, but down here, time dissolves. You nap when you can. An hour here, 20 minutes there. Your body never sinks into full sleep. It hovers, wary, ears tuned to engines, pumps, alarms. You wake often, sometimes for duty, sometimes for nothing. When you rise, your body aches as though you ran miles. Some men talk in their sleep, murmurs, moans, half-sentences. Hard to port, hold her steady, words of command repeated in dreams. Others mutter names, of wives, of cities, of things they won't see again. Once, you hear a man scream outright, a strangled cry that jolts half the compartment awake. He pretends later it never happened. No one corrects him. Nightmares are contagious. One man's terror infects the rest. You dream his dream, feel his panic. Wake with his sweat on your own skin. You realize sleep is not private anymore. Even in rest you share yourselves. There is also the strange intimacy of dreams that comfort. A loaf of fresh bread, a meadow in spring, a kiss. These visit you with such clarity you taste them, smell them, live them. You wake, smiling, then remember where you are. The cruelty is sharper than any nightmare. Sometimes you wish you hadn't dreamed at all. Exhaustion reshapes men. Tempers fray. Voices rise. Small insults flare into arguments, extinguished quickly because sound carries. The cook snaps at a joke. The machinist slams a wrench harder than needed. The captain's eyes redden, his patience thinning like worn rope. Sleep deprivation is a weapon, and the boat wields it mercilessly. Yet sometimes, in the haze of half-sleep, you find a strange peace. The boat rocks faintly, a steel cradle swaying in black water. The engines thrum steady, like a mother's heartbeat. You imagine you are unborn again, floating inside some womb of metal and salt, waiting for rebirth into light. The thought soothes you, absurd as it is. You sleep a little longer. Dreams carry rumors. 2. Men swap them like stories, whispering between shifts. I dreamt we surfaced under a sky full of stars. I saw home clear as daylight. I dreamt the boat split, and we all walked out onto the sea floor. Dreams become prophecies, omens. Some men take them seriously, marking days until a prediction is proved or disproved. Others laugh, but even laughter has an edge. Your own dreams grow stranger as patrol drags on. Once you dream the boat itself speaks, not with words, but with groans and sighs. You dream it asks you to feed it more, to give it pieces of yourself. When you wake, you find your hands gripping the bulkhead like it were a living thing. You don't tell anyone. You're not sure if they would laugh or agree. The truth is, the boat never sleeps, Yekadi. It hums, breathes, sweats. Even when you drift off, you sense its vigilance. It keeps watch while you surrender. It dreams with you. Or perhaps it dreams through you. And so, in the narrow coffin of your bunk, rocked by a sea you cannot see, you drift again. You chase warmth. You chase silence. You chase the impossible. Real rest. But the boat always wins. It takes your sleep as it takes your sweat, your breath, your fear. Another hunger, another tithe. When you wake, it feels less like rising than resurfacing from a depth inside your own mind. You blink, rub grit from your eyes, swing legs over the edge of the bunk. The air is the same. The smell is the same. The boat is the same. The only thing that has changed is you. More tired, more hollow, more stitched with shadows. Sleep in the dark does not restore you. It reshapes you. And with each dream, you become more like the boat. You write in your head because there is nowhere else to write. Paper is scarce, pencils rarer still, and privacy non-existent. So you compose letters silently, tracing words against the inside of your skull, drafting sentences to voices that will never hear them. At first, you try to keep them ordinary. Dear mother, I am well. Dear brother, the food is tolerable. My dearest, I think of you constantly. But the ordinariness feels false. There is no well. There is no tolerable. There is only steel, sweat, and the sea pressing in. The truth would shatter them. So you leave it unspoken. You imagine writing anyway. You picture your hand moving across a page, the scratch of lead, the lines filling with confessions you cannot make aloud. I am afraid every hour. The boat moans like a wounded animal. The air tastes of rust and skin. Sometimes I wonder if we are already dead, just waiting to notice. But you know these words would never pass the censor. Officers read every line, blacking out secrets with thick strokes until letters look like graves dug into paper. Coordinates, patrols, even the weather, everything is forbidden. You could write of sunsets, but there are none. You could write of landscapes, but there is only sea. What is left to say? That the ceiling drips onto your face while you sleep? That men fight in whispers because voices carry? That you cannot remember what grass smells like? So the letters remain in your mind. They grow heavy there, pressing behind your eyes. You whisper them in dreams, sometimes aloud, so the man in the bunk below shifts uneasily, thinking you are talking to him. You are not. You are speaking to ghosts. Some men actually write, despite it all. They hunch over scraps of notebook, shielding pages with their arms, pencil scratching like a mouse in the dark. They describe nonsense, safe details about meals, about how much they miss home. You know the letters lie, but you envy them anyway. At least their lies will travel somewhere. Yours remain locked inside you, silent as the sea. You think about your sweetheart most. You picture her opening a letter, smoothing its creases, holding it as though it carried your touch. You imagine her smile, the way her lips move as she reads your words aloud. But the fantasy stumbles. What words could you give her? That you stink like a butcher shop? That the boat might become your coffin any day? That you pray not for victory, but simply for survival? No. You love her too much to share that truth. So you write nothing, and instead she waits, perhaps wondering if silence means death. The officers pretend letters are a privilege, but you know better. They are chains. Men who receive them feel both joy and despair. A letter from home means someone still waits, still cares, but it also means someone is left behind, suffering absence, suffering worry. You've seen men clutch envelopes like talismans, holding them close during alarms, pressing them against their hearts. You've also seen men crumble after reading. News of illness, news of betrayal, news of life moving on without them. Paper can wound deeper than steel. You recall one shipmate who tore his letter into strips, stuffed them into his mouth, and chewed them into pulp before swallowing. He said it was the only way to keep the words inside him. Others begged him to explain, but he never did. He only wept afterward, silently, rocking in his bunk like a child. The stench of his grief joined the rest of the submarine's atmosphere, and no fan could clear it. Sometimes you compose letters to the dead, names you barely knew, faces you remember only from photographs tucked in lockers. Dear Carl, we toasted your courage last night. Dear Captain Mueller, we sail deeper now because of you. These letters, too, go nowhere. They dissolve into the hum of engines, but speaking them inside your mind feels like acknowledgement, like burial. The cruelest letters are the ones you imagine receiving. You picture words addressed to you in neat script. We miss you. We are proud of you. Please, come home safe. You feel their absence more than their presence. No envelope, no handwriting, no perfume folded between sheets of paper. Only silence. Silence is a letter, too, one written by fate instead of a hand. And so you continue writing without ink, scratching sentences across the inside of your skull. Some nights, you even mouth them into the dark, shaping soundless words. The habit comforts you, though it also reminds you how far you've drifted from the world above. If you survive this patrol, maybe you will write for real. Maybe you will sit at a wooden desk in a sunlit room, pen in hand, and pour out all the truths you swallowed. Or maybe you will not. Maybe you will find the words too heavy, too contaminated by the stench of this place. Maybe you will realize the only honest letter is silence. For now, the sea censors all. Your letters remain trapped, unsent, unread. Like so much else down here, they rot inside you. The sea is never truly silent, but there are moments when it pretends. You sit at your station, headphones pressed against your ears, listening. Normally, the ocean is alive with sound, pings of sonar, distant propellers, whales calling across leagues of black, the boat's own heart beating in gears and pumps. But now, suddenly, everything hushes. The machinery runs softer. Men's voices drop, even the air feels afraid to stir. The silence is not peace, it is warning. On the surface, silence can be beautiful. Here, it is suffocating. It settles heavy on your chest, makes you hyper-aware of your own pulse, of the rasp of your breath. You feel guilty for breathing too loud, for shifting in your seat, for existing at all. The silence sharpens every sense, turning sweat into rivers down your back, turning shadows into threats. You know what silence means. The enemy is near. Somewhere above, destroyers prowl. Their ears sweep the sea, searching for the faintest clue. A clank, a rattle, a careless word dropped on steel, and death rains down in canisters of explosives. So the captain orders silent running, and the boat obeys. Engines throttle down, pumps slow, fans ease to whispers. The submarine shrinks into stillness, hiding in the belly of the sea. But silence has its own noise. You hear the hull creak as pressure gnaws at it. You hear your own stomach twist in hunger. You hear the cough you try to swallow but cannot. The man beside you shifts a boot, and it might as well be a gunshot. Every sound magnifies, bouncing in your skull until you're sure the destroyers must hear it too. The minutes stretch, cruel and elastic. 10 minutes feel like an hour. An hour feels like eternity. You sit frozen, sweat crawling, while the sea above churns with predators you cannot see. Your imagination fills the void. The gray shapes cutting through waves, the men on deck squinting into spray, the depth charges stacked like fruit ready to drop. You picture their ears pressed to hydrophones, just as yours are, straining to catch the whisper of your boat. The silence tests discipline. It asks impossible things of men. Don't shift, don't sneeze, don't scratch the itch crawling up your neck. Hold still, hold quiet, hold your breath if you must. The strain is unbearable, and yet it is borne because the alternative is worse. Sometimes the silence breaks without warning. A single ping, metallic, hollow, echoing through water like a hammer on cathedral bells. Sonar. They've found you. The ping crawls up your spine, makes your teeth ache. Each return signal is a countdown, each beat a drum announcing your location. Men clench fists, jaws, prayers. Then comes the storm, propellers roaring above, and the first depth charge rolling off the deck. But sometimes the silence continues. It stretches so long you begin to wonder if the destroyers were ever there at all. Maybe the hydrophone picked up nothing. Maybe the captain's fear was misplaced. Maybe the ocean is empty and you are alone after all. Hope flickers, relief too. But hope is dangerous in silence. The moment you unclench, the storm arrives. You remember one patrol when the silence lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of stillness, of sweat dripping into eyes, of bladders aching because no one dared move to the head. By the end, men's hands shook not from fear, but from exhaustion. When the captain finally whispered, "Resume normal speed," half the crew collapsed into their bunks, sleeping like corpses. But even in dreams, their ears rang with phantom pings. Silence does not always come from enemies. Sometimes it is forced by nature. A storm above churns waves so violently that the ocean below grows eerily calm. Or the currents shift, and for a few minutes the sea becomes glass, smothering all noise. In those moments, the silence feels almost holy, as though the ocean itself has paused to listen. You wait for it to speak again, but it never does. And then there is the silence within yourself, the moment before panic takes hold, when your mind empties of everything but listening. You realize you have become the boat, steel wrapped in pressure, hiding in the black, daring not to speak. Your heart slows, your breath shallows, your thoughts still. You are silence embodied. But the silence is fragile. It cannot last. A wrench slips, a valve hisses, a man coughs, and just like that, the storm begins. Explosions roll through water, booming like thunder underwater, shaking the boat as though giants are stomping on its hull. The silence shatters, and you almost miss it, almost long for it again, even though it was torment. You learn that silence is not absence, it is presence. It is the enemy circling above, listening. It is the ocean pressing in from all sides. It is your own body betraying you with heartbeat and breath. Silence is the sea's language, and you are forced to speak it. When you think of home, you imagine noise, birds singing, wind through trees, children shouting, laughter spilling from taverns, the jangle of bicycle bells. You imagine those sounds so vividly you could weep. Then you open your eyes, see the cramped steel coffin around you, and remember. Down here, silence reigns. The silence before the storm is worse than the storm itself. Explosions you can understand, noise you can endure. But silence gnaws at your soul. The hunt drifts away behind you. But the sea won't let you rise. The captain holds depth, whispering patience like a prayer, and the boat answers by making your lungs feel smaller. At first you think it's nerves. Then a film slides over your thoughts, thin, gauzy, and you realize it isn't fear, it's the air. It has turned wrong. Headache arrives as a tight band, not pain so much as pressure cinched above the eyes. You blink, slow. Numbers wobble on a gauge. Someone asks you for a wrench, and the word for wrench eludes you, hovering just out of reach like a moth avoiding a lantern. You swallow. The taste is sour metal and old breath. CO2 is patient in its cruelty. You can't see it building. You only feel the seams inside your skull loosen. The scrubbers rasp and clatter. The trays of soda lime eating carbon dioxide and spitting out heat and water. But they've been running hard for hours, and the powder cakes in places where no one can scrape without a full shutdown. Fans keep the air moving. A dutiful lie, circulation without salvation. Matches are contraband, and yet one appears, as they always do, when the air grows strange. A hand shields it from the draft. The sulfur blooms. The flame rises small and shaky, then gutters and dies in a blink. The room watches the dead wick like a physician reading a chart. No one speaks. You don't need a manual to translate that diagnosis. Your chest ache doesn't feel like the drowning you practiced for. It feels like climbing a staircase with a stone on the sternum, each breath a purchase you cannot quite afford. Somewhere in the control room, a man stifles a laugh that isn't laughter, then breathes too fast, then stops himself and counts on his fingers. 1, 2, 3, in, 1, 2, 3, 4, out. You copy him. It helps until it doesn't. Thoughts tilt. A joke occurs to you, and you smile without remembering the punchline. Words arrive out of order. You tuck them back. Neat as tools on a rack you can't name. You look at your crewmate, and his face has an extra layer, a shimmer of the unreal that makes you wonder if he is about to speak your thoughts before you do. A hiss. Blessed, purposeful. The petty officer opens the wheel to the oxygen line a quarter turn, then another. No waste, no heroics. And the boat exhales a thin, white nothing that smells of nothing at all. You feel it first at the base of the nose, a coolness like fresh linen. Then in the blood, a brightness. The headache loosens half a notch. Someone mutters, "Danke," not to the officer, but to the valve. Oxygen is a gift with a price. Feed too much and men light like candles, lungs greedy, nerves jittering, hands clumsy. Feed too little, and they slide off the edge of the world still sitting upright. So you take sips, not gulps, and try not to think about the gauges that measure how long souls may keep their tempers. The scrubbers complain again, an indignant clunk. The engineer pulls a tray, pale pellets clotted into damp, hot clumps. He stirs with a wooden spoon like a cook tending a cruel porridge, steam wetting his face, and slides the tray home. You remember the chemistry lesson drawn on a chalkboard back in training. Acid meets base, gas caught and tamed, and marvel at the hubris of writing life in chalk. Symptoms bloom around you like a quiet epidemic. One man turns gentle and stupid, smiling at nothing, confusing port with starboard and left with memory. Another grows mean in whispers, eyes bright, picking fights with valves. A third simply falls asleep on his feet, forehead resting against a bulkhead, breathing shallow as a cat. You want to shake him, but the captain's palm appears, light on your wrist. Let him drift, wake him slow. Panic is contagious here, so is calm. Your gums sting, your tongue sticks to your teeth. You drink, but the water tastes like old tin and breath. The man at the hydrophone pinches his nose, and the red drains from his face. He shakes his head once, fine, and pushes the headset tighter. Duty is a shape you can inhabit even when thought thins to ribbon. The air sweetens in the wrong way. It smells of pears and pennies, a treacherous perfume. Someone whispers acetone, someone else ketones. No one says starvation. The cook, who knows the chemistry of men better than the engineer knows machines, passes a scrap of bread hand to hand. Not kindness, medicine, chew, swallow. Anchor yourself in starch. Time bubbles and bursts. You measure it by the rate at which your hands forget they belong to you. The boat is a long corridor where words go to mislay themselves. You keep yours simple. Valve. Aft. Hold. Orders shrink to shapes even a drowning man can recognize. Then the captain risks the question that tastes like salvation and death. How's it above? The hydrophone listens. Water talks to his bones. He raises 2 fingers, screws, moving away. The destroyers have taken their pings elsewhere, cat noses raised to a different seam in the sea. The decision to rise is not a switch, it's a negotiation with math and luck. Batteries complain, air complains, men complain without speaking. You feel the boat's angle change, nose nudging toward brightness you will not see. Pumps wake, cautious. The hull's groan lifts a half tone. No one cheers. Surfacing is a promise the ocean has broken before. But hope is another gas, and you inhale it despite yourself. You imagine the hatch wheel cold under your palm, the first cut of true wind. You imagine taste returning to air, the way fresh oxygen bites like clean apples. You imagine stars. You imagine simply not imagining. Before the climb, the medic does his rounds. He is no doctor, only a man with a red cross sewn where courage will have to do. He checks pupils, presses fingertips, asks for numbers, count backward by sevens, and accepts fives and fours and the wrong sums because the boat has subtracted too much already. He tapes a split knuckle without comment. He pockets a tooth one man lost to a pair of pliers the day before and says, "We'll make a story of it when we can bite meat again." This passes for bedside manner. You think of the world above as a rumor. Whitecaps and cold, gulls and diesel flowing honest into open sky. You think of the deck under boots, the way it flexes with waves, the way men remember walking. You think of filling your lungs until your ribs protest, and then filling them again just to hear your body say yes. The captain nods once. Ballast answers. The boat lightens. Your ears pop. Fans lift their pitch as if clearing a throat. You steady a gauge with 2 fingers that won't stop trembling and tell yourself it's the vibration, not the animal fear inside your bones, not the fragile, expanding bubble of air you carry with you through blackness. When the hatch finally dogs open, the wind does not smell like roses. It smells like cold iron and honest salt and freedom that will last minutes if you're lucky. You climb, eyes burning, and the first lungful is so sharp you cough, and the cough feels like being born wrong and then right again. Night throws a net of stars across the water. You do not cry. You cannot spare the moisture. You just breathe, and in that breath there is a country no map maker ever drew. You don't stay. You never stay. Batteries need charge, lungs need refill, but death needs only a silhouette on a moonlit swell. The diesels start, the deck vibrates, and above the hum you hear men laughing like they've remembered how. It lasts a handful of heartbeats. Then the order, the wheel, the clang, the seal, the descent. And with it, the lesson you will relearn until the sea keeps you. Down here, even air is borrowed. You sign for every breath with your pulse and return it, with interest, to the dark. You arrive not with trumpets, but with coughs. The boat limps into harbor with a tilt in her shoulders, paint scabbed off by pressure and spray, ballast venting like a smoker clearing his throat. No band waits. No officer with medals counts you out one by one. A crane squeals, a gull scolds. 2 dock workers glance up, then back to their clipboards. That is your welcome home. The ladder bites your boots in the old rhythm, and then you are out. Daylight like a fist to the eyes. The air is too clean. It knifes up your nose, scrubs places that forgot how to feel. You cough, watering at the shock of it, and for a breath you hate the sky for being so large. The deck dips under you, honest motion, and then the pier holds you, treacherously still. Your knees don't trust it. You take a step, and your legs measure the world wrong, expecting narrow corridors and finding empty space. People on land walk like they invented the trick. You walk as if the ground might slide away. In a way, it already has. You catch your reflection in a warehouse window and startle. The face is pale where sun never reached, leathered where oil always did. Cheekbones have come up through the skin. Eyes sit deeper, as if they learned to hide. There's grease in your hair that soap will argue with for days. You understand, without wanting to, what civilians mean when they whisper, "The U-boat look." No one says the names of the missing. You count them anyway, hand touching the rails they use to steady, the latch they use to flip. A pair of boots waits under a bunk that won't need them. A rag, stiff with old grease. Lies folded the way he always folded it. You consider unfolding it, just to change the shape of the absence. You don't. The cook sets aside one extra mug on the galley shelf without looking at it. No one moves it. Your boat lists, and for a ridiculous second you think she does it to lean away from the empty spaces. Debrief is a small room that smells like dry paper. An officer you've never met asks neat questions in a neat voice. You answer in crooked sentences that leave out the moaning steel and the taste of bad air and how laughter sounded after the charges hit close. He writes anyway. He will file a report that gets read by someone even cleaner, who will underline a number and circle a word and decide what you did. You stand at attention, nod, leave your fear on the chair like a coat you're not allowed to bring into town. They hand you pay that feels like a joke, and 3 days leave that feels like a dare. The boat floods with men carrying sacks of potatoes, coils of wire, soap. Welders with quiet eyes trace your hull's cracks, talk to each other the way doctors talk outside a patient's door. Painters smooth over bruises as if color can teach steel to forget. You watch from the pier with your hands suddenly, uselessly empty. When you turn to go, you place your palm flat on the conning tower. The metal is cool and faintly wet. You don't know if you're saying goodbye or sorry. Shore begins with a bath that goes on until the water gives up. Soap burns where the scrubbers and harness rubbed you bare. You stand there too long, dizzy with the luxury of warm, unmeasured water, and turn the taps off 3 times, certain someone will shout at you for waste. No one does. You step out smelling like other people, and it feels like a costume. A bed waits. It might as well be a stage. The mattress is too soft. The room is too wide. You lie there blinking into silence that is not silence at all. No fans, no pumps, no men shifting in the dark above you. And your mind begins to invent what it misses. You turn on a fan just to give yourself a hum. The hum is wrong. You turn it off. You lie awake, counting pings that do not come. You try the tavern. Beer tastes of memory until it tastes of guilt. Voices rise and fall. Laughter spills easy. A woman on the next stool asks if it was terrible down there, and you say, "Not so bad." And in that moment, you learn a new language, land talk, where words mean the opposite of what they say. Someone claps your shoulder, toasts you as a hero, then asks if you saw action, as if drowning slowly weren't action enough. You smile, and the smile hurts. Home is worse and better. A mother looks at you like a nurse looks at a fever. Her hands hover a second short of touching your face. Afraid to find out what the sea has done. The table is set with things that grew under open sky. Bread that tears with a sound you haven't heard in months. Butter that catches sunlight. You eat too fast, then too slow. You apologize to a cup for knocking it against the table. No one understands why you apologize to a cup. They laugh, and you force yourself to join them. Later, you realize you were listening for the clang on steel, the echo along a corridor. The captain's head turning at the sound. That night, the dreams return, but with colors you had forgotten. Yellow of lamplight on wallpaper, green of leaves that don't belong to cabbages, blue too bright to be paint. You wake with your hands on the mattress, feeling for bolts that aren't there. The quiet is violent. You walk to the window and open it and stick your head out like a dog on a train, gulping air you do not have to sign for. A bird makes a small bureaucratic noise in a tree. You cry without understanding why. You tell yourself you will write letters now, the ones you drafted against your skull. You sit with paper that smells of starch and put your pencil down on it as if the point might pierce a hatch. Dear, you stop. You try again. We are back, you write at last, and then stare at the sentence until it looks like a lie. The page remains mostly white. You fold it anyway. Your hands shake, but not the way they did when the charges walked toward you. This is a different quake, the one that comes when the floor is too still. You visit the boat just to look, you tell yourself, just to see how repairs go. You go early enough that no one will ask why. Men in work coats nod without pausing. The torpedo room is open to air. Light falls into spaces that haven't seen it for weeks, and everything looks wrong in it, like a stage set. The galley is scrubbed. The head, absurd shrine, gleams with new gaskets. You breathe in the dockyard cocktail, diesel, tar, river mud, and your shoulders climb down from your ears. You recognize this smell. You recognize yourself in it, and you resent that. Orders wait. Of course they do. You knew that when you came up the ladder, before the officer asked neat questions, before the bath. The paper says another patrol. The map says a lane you can find with your eyes closed inside a steel tube. You read your own name, and it looks like a stranger's. Men slap your back, glad and careful. New boys move uncertainly along the pier, faces you will memorize by their coughs. That night you drink less. You pack without thinking, socks rolled the way a compartment wants, razor tucked where the boat once taught you it won't slide when the hull lurches. Habit is a harness you no longer wish to loosen. You sleep badly and wake before dawn. You put your hand on the wall to steady yourself, and the plaster does not hum. You miss the hum. You hate yourself for missing it. On the pier. The boat floats like a question you've already answered. She smells faintly of new paint over old stories. Welds shine like fresh scars. The petty officer with the clipboard is the only ceremony you're allowed. He calls your name the way men call cattle. You step forward, you nod, you climb. At the hatch, you pause, one heartbeat, maybe two, and look toward a city that holds your bed, your mother, a cup that will not echo. Then you go down into the smell you know, into the cramped arithmetic where breath equals numbers equals chance. The hatch dogs shut with the sound all hatches make when they end a sentence. You take your place by a valve you could find in the dark. You touch it with 2 fingers, like greeting an animal you both fear and feed. Around you the boat begins to breathe again. You are home, you tell yourself. and the thought settles where pride used to live. Not because land rejected you, but because the sea has already claimed the part of you that decides. The engines clear their throats, the lines drop. The pier slides away. The boat, patient predator and patient coffin, points her nose toward the old hunger. You don't look back. You have learned there is nothing there for you that the ocean will allow you to keep. The first dive after leave tastes different. Land still lingers on your tongue, bread crust, soap, a woman's perfume that clung to your collar. But the sea wastes no time reminding you who rules. The moment ballast takes her in, the air thickens, steel groans, light vanishes. The boat becomes your body again. You fit back into it like a man returning to a cell that already remembers his scent. You tell yourself this is duty, patriotism, orders signed and stamped. But deep down you know it is ownership. The ocean does not let go of what it claims. It does not matter if you crave land, love, laughter. Those things fade like paint. Pressure, darkness, silence, those remain. They teach you until you speak their grammar in your bones. At first, you resisted. On the early patrols, you counted days, whispered prayers, swore you would not return once free. Then came the hunt, the pings, the storm of charges. Terror taught you the truth. No matter how you begged, you still held course, still flooded tanks, still shut hatches. You obeyed the sea's logic. The more you survived, the more you belonged. The captain is different now, not crueler, not kinder, emptier. His face is carved thinner. His voice, once sharp as orders, is now smooth as tide, inevitable. You realize he has made the same bargain you are making. He no longer fights the sea. He interprets it. He lets it move through him like current through kelp. You watch him and wonder how many patrols it takes before a man becomes fluent in drowning. The crew changes too. New boys arrive, soft in the cheeks, smelling of laundry and nerves. They flinch at the hatch slam. They stare too long at gauges as though meaning hides in numbers. You catch yourself not envying them. You catch yourself teaching them gently, as if to ease them into the same chains. You show them how to fold socks, where to wedge a tin so it won't roll when the boat heaves. You speak calm when they wake sweating, ears still tuned to phantom pings. You do not tell them the truth, that the sea has already signed them, that the boat is no longer a machine, but a throat they live inside, and sooner or later it will swallow. Night on patrol is indistinguishable from day. You measure time by shifts and headaches. The world above could be on fire or covered in snow. You would not know. And yet, you feel it. Storms beat against the surface and the boat rocks groaning. Sunlight somewhere warms a current, and the water down here swells faintly warmer too. The sea tells you everything in murmurs. You learn to listen, to translate pressure, to read silence. It becomes your only news. When you dream now, it is not of home. It is of hatches sealing, ballast rushing, hull flexing. You dream of steel bones creaking like old trees in wind. You dream of silence that tastes metallic. You dream of black water pressing in from all directions, not as threat, but as embrace. Waking feels like betrayal. Dreams feel like truth. One night, off watch, you sit in the galley with a crust of bread that tastes of oil. The cook hums. The engineer snores where he sits. You close your eyes, and the sound of the sea through steel becomes a lullaby. For a moment, you think, perhaps this is what I was made for. Not land, not sunlight, not open space, but this long coffin where men breathe borrowed air and call it life. You open your eyes and meet the gaze of the petty officer across the table. He has thought the same thought. You see it in the stillness of his stare. Neither of you speaks it. You simply chew. You simply exist, two men already belonging more to the ocean than to the shore. You realize then what you have become. Not sailor, not soldier, not hero, property. The ocean owns you, and it does not lease. Every patrol is proof of the deed. You are steel, diesel, sweat, and silence, nothing more. And when the time comes, when the pressure exceeds the hull's patience, when the charges finally find their mark, you will not die. You will be repossessed. The thought should terrify. Instead, it soothes. There is no decision left, no burden of choice, only belonging, only inevitability. Above you, unseen stars scatter across a night you will never touch. Waves roll, ships sail, gulls cry. But none of it matters, not anymore. The sea has you. The sea keeps you. And in the black hush of patrol, with the hull humming like a heartbeat, you close your eyes, inhale stale air, and surrender to the truth you have always known. You never returned to port. You never left. You were always here. And so the story drifts to its end. The sea closes over the patrols, the hunts, the long hours of stale air and silent waiting. The boat sinks into memory, as all machines eventually do, and the men, whether they returned to port or remained beneath the waves, become only shadows in history. What remains is the rhythm, the steady pulse of engines, the groan of steel under pressure, the soft hiss of breath drawn in and let go. When you listen closely, you may still hear it, like the sound of a distant train or the whisper of wind across an empty field. Not frightening, not sharp, just steady, and strangely comforting. Imagine yourself now, no longer a sailor but only a listener, watching from far away. The water is calm. The sky above is quiet. The boat is gone, and with it the weight of duty, the noise of orders, the closeness of steel walls. All that remains is the wide sea, stretching into the horizon, endless and still. Let your own breath fall into that rhythm, in and out, like the tide, patient, like the waves, unhurried. The ocean asks nothing more of you now. It simply carries you. And in that carrying, there is peace. Rest comes easily here, as naturally as the tide flows in and out. The story has folded itself closed. Your mind can soften, your body loosen. The patrol is over. The night is calm. You are safe to let go, safe to sleep.